Welcome back to another week of Political Breakfast. We are so glad that you are here and listening on WABE. We appreciate our new listeners and of course, our loyal listeners. A lot going on in the political world here in Georgia and across the nation. Joining me today are our strategists, Democratic strategist Tharon Johnson and Republican strategist Brian Robinson. Hello, hello, hello.
Good morning.
Hope you all had a wonderful weekend.
Yeah, I had a very stressful weekend.
Why am I?
I had a very stressful weekend.
Giggling? Why am I giggling when I said I hope you had a wonderful weekend watching football?
Yes.
Watching Georgia football specifically? What happened?
Well, I know Tharon was there for it.
Tharon, you're speechless.
I'll tell you. I mean, for me, I haven't had that stress since the 2021 national championship against Alabama. But what an incredible comeback. I mean, it was a comeback for the ages. I knew that was going to happen. Yeah. I did not know that was going to happen. We looked completely clueless that first quarter. But it was an amazing display the second half. Gave me some hope for the rest of the season. I could have lost hope if the second half looked like the first. But, hey, it's great to be a Georgia Bulldog. I'm proud of the boys for how they came back, maintained their composure. We got a lot of work to do, and hopefully we're going to take a lot of anger and aggression into our game against Auburn on Saturday.
No matter what team it is, I'm always surprised when the other team puts points up on the board first, even Alabama. So I was shocked when it was 7-0, and then it just went on from there.
Yeah, 28-0 was pretty shocking. That was
I mean, I would say this. B-Rob and I talked about this. We were together Friday before the game, and he knows what I'm about to say. Every time former President Donald Trump shows up at a Georgia game, we lose. I mean, for our loyal listeners, if he's been to a game, not as president or former president, but we all remember his display pregame at the national championship in Atlanta, and it was brutal, Lisa. I mean, I was there, got there very early, tailgated, and University of Alabama has a beautiful campus. A lot of Roll Tide. Not a lot of trash talking before the game, but surprisingly, there were a lot of Georgia fans there. So I had a lot of Go Dogs going in. I felt confident. And then fast forward, we get there. I'm pregame on the sideline, and I'm seeing Milroe, who's just, an athlete. All the number 2 Williams, the 17-year-old. Yeah. And I knew pregame. I'm just gonna say, I was like, because you could tell that Alabama had this swag, and Georgia had a little swag, but Alabama's swag was just different. And then, Lisa, to your point, the first drive, the way they just went down the field methodically and scored, and we just couldn't answer. And so being there 28-0, and they flashed that camera up, and I didn't even look up because I knew who was behind me. They were all taking the cameras out and, trying to film. And then Donald Trump sits up there with that red tie. We're down 28-0. And I didn't see a lot of Georgia fans booing or cheering. We were all worried about the game. And then, of course, the comeback. And then you just kind of knew that even when we scored that last touchdown, the celebrations on the sideline, you saw Alabama sideline. They were very shocked. And then out of nowhere, that pass happens. And then even at the game, give a shout out to Beck. Beck is getting a lot of criticism for throwing an interception. But if you look at all the plays that he made, this guy threw the ball almost, 50 times, B-Rob? He did a great job, but it just shows you that play, that interception wasn't the defining moment. It was a big moment. But you can't get down that early to a team like that. But I got to give a shout out to the players. The coaches came down on them pretty hard. Those guys could have gave up, seriously. When it was 28-0, they could have given up and packed it in, but they kept fighting.
So. Georgia? That's not Georgia.
I know. Yeah. A lot of drop passes, a defense that looked clueless, things that we haven't seen at UGA in a long time. Carson made some bad decisions there. The safety was a ridiculous call, probably made a huge impact in the end of the game, which we never could have thought when it was 28-7 that 30-7 was going to make a difference. But it was a ridiculous call. And look, we didn't lose because of the refs, but I swear to God, it is always atrocious officiating when it is Bama versus UGA.
I was there, man. You can just tell. I think they got like little signals they send up to the crowd of refs. It was bad officiating. But real quick, hey, shout out to those Falcons. I was at that game.
The Falcons had a good one.
But
some people saying it was by mistake, though. By chance.
These Saints fans. Let me get on these Saints fans right now. Alabama fans they trash talkers. They were rude. They were not nice. But these Saints fans, man, I mean, they get in your face. I mean, all this who-dat chanting before the game and the Falcons. And so, Tyson went with me to the game. He's my good luck charm. Every time I take him to a game, we win. But they hung in there.
So you stayed. You stayed to the end?
I stayed to almost the very end because I had to get him out of there and get him back home. But, man, the Falcons really honestly could be 4-0 right now. Seriously, every single game that we played, we could have won. And so
the thing that concerns me is that the scoring Sunday was special teams and defense largely. That's not something you can count on every week. That's my only thing. Celebrate the win. It's great. And to Tharon's point on the Saints fan, here's what I got to say about that. Those jokers, they ain't flying in from New Orleans. They live here. They've lived here since 2007 when they all came here. And like, if you don't want to be part of our culture, you can go back. New Orleans is restored. It's not still destroyed by Katrina. Go back. If you don't want to be one of us, that's fine. Just go back home.
Now, B-Raw, I'm going to stop you there now because, these Saints fans, they'll get in your face, bro. I don't want them to roll up on you and be like, oh, yeah, you talking that junk at the podcast. But I feel you. All right, Lisa, I'm sorry. We're done talking sports. We're ready to talk politics.
Well, a lot of the candidates are stumping. It's the season to be seen. And Donald Trump, of course, was at the game on Saturday. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Joe Biden getting some criticism for how they've responded to what happened to us here with Helene. I don't know. Do you think that's fair at this point?
Well, let me just say this. And I think as we tape, I'm hearing this from sources. We've actually probably, and it's going to be confirmed if it hasn't been already, upwards to 40 deaths in the state of Georgia. And so first and foremost, before we get into the politics of this, definitely want to send my condolences to those families, those loved ones who lost someone in this horrific hurricane. Secondly, and I know Brian is going to, do this as well, so I'll save a few. But, I want to thank the first responders, particularly all the teachers. And then one of the things that I missed last week, Big Rob, is that, we didn't think about this, but think about all the senior centers, nursing homes, places that did not have power. And these are people who are top of the priority list when this happens. So big shout out to Georgia Power and the EMCs. All the county public works, the mayor's offices across the state, and particularly along that southeastern CSRA, Augusta. Please pray for the folks in Augusta. I've seen some pictures out of Augusta that were just
trying
terrible.
To get power.
And so, again, power is still out for some, but Georgia Power was prepared. They in the media, you did it on Morning Edition. Lisa, I heard you telling folks, hey, stay at home, like be prepared for this storm. This is going to be like no other. And then lastly, look, on the politics. The thing about responding to storms, you're getting at a question a lot of folks are saying, like, why is Vice President Kamala Harris or President Joe Biden not here? It's one of these things where I really wish that they would come. As we tape, I haven't gotten any official notification that either the president or the vice president is coming. As you mentioned, Trump is scheduled to be in the state. So I would say this. I think they need to come. And they need to come with a purpose. They need to come with aid, which to give a shout out to the president. I mean, the minute that the state declared a state of emergency, as Brian has reminded me, that triggers federal funds to come down. So the funding is there. Our 2 U.S. senators, I think definitely Ossoff, I think Warnock as well, are doing it. And so, unfortunately, Lisa, the criticism is fair, but it's unfair. I do think the president or the vice president will come. But when they arrive in the state, you got to be bringing something and helping the people who need it the most. Now, if I was running the campaign for president of the United States of America, I would have done everything I possibly could logistically to try to get the vice president here. However, I do want to be sensitive to the fact that, as Brian knows, you plan this stuff out in the campaign so far in advance. And so maybe it's something with scheduling. It's definitely not a lack of caring. It's definitely not a lack of prioritization. It's really more so just, okay, you don't want to be appearing to just grandstand. But Trump doesn't care because Trump is going to come down and be at Valdosta. And I kind of feel like, the president and the vice president will do more. They have done some things already, but I think they physically will be here pretty soon.
I hope that when Trump goes to Valdosta, he does like he did after the Puerto Rico hurricane. You remember that thing where he was throwing out the paper towel rolls?
He was throwing them in the stadium. Did you see him in Alabama? I don't know what he was throwing to people. No, he was throwing something. I got to look at the video. He was throwing something. I believe this was real. I saw him throwing, I don't know if it was chicken tender boxes with fries or or something. But go back and maybe Lily can look this up while we're on the air. But Lily, please see Donald Trump was in the stadium, I believe, in Tuscaloosa, throwing something to the fans. I don't know what it was. It looked like chicken tender boxes with fries. Well, but let's just check and see what it is. But I'm sorry, Brian, go ahead.
No, I mean, if somebody threw me a chicken tender box, they're gonna get my vote. I don't care, party, anything. I'm voting for you. I would start with saying, Tharon mentioned the senior centers, and one of the hardest hit areas was Augusta, which is where my family traditionally has been from. My grandmother, who was in her mid-90s, her nursing home lost power in North Augusta, South Carolina, and I think through the weekend did not have power. Tried to check in on her. She's not real good about answering the cell phone, but in her defense, the power may be out. She may not have power on her phone. So I'm not quite sure what her situation is, but it is very concerning when you have elderly relatives who were in that scenario. And yes, Georgia Power had somewhere between 10 and 16,000 linemen and other personnel ready to go stage. And one thing that I haven't seen in the news, but Georgia Power's staging for this storm was bigger than what had been done for Katrina, which is probably one of the most catastrophic hurricanes in the nation's history. So they were putting every resource that they had on hand. Now, in Augusta, in places like that, even with all that manpower, it's going to take time. I mean, so many trees down. My relatives there, their yards, some of their homes have been, hit by falling trees. So it's going to take a long time I think it's something like, of all the wiring that has to be replaced across the state for Georgia Power, it comes to about 475 miles of wiring.
Wow.
So that's gonna take time. So easy for me to say be patient when my house has got power. But it's gonna be a little bit. When it comes to the storm recovery and the politics, being seen is the number one thing in the early days. Eventually, it becomes about delivery. Tharon said, "Bring something." He's right. One thing that Republicans may begin saying, I don't think it's the right time, but early this week it may be, we start transitioning out of the immediate recovery into other elements of storm recovery, is we still are short $50 million from the feds from the last storm that hit Georgia agriculture so hard. If I'm John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock, I'm going to start doing a steady drumbeat about that. If I'm a Republican in the congressional delegation, I'm going to start bringing that up. And for the life of me, Tharon's right. They do need to come. They need to come with one of those like oversized checks to deliver to the people in South Georgia. That's what I'd do if I was in a tight election campaign, weeks away from Election Day. When you have two swing states that have been hard hit, and the devastation that we're seeing out of Western North Carolina is actually even worse than what we're seeing in Georgia right now, because there's no cell phone towers up there. You can't reach people there, which is not the case in Georgia right now, as bad as it is in Valdosta and other parts of South Georgia and Augusta. So I would be in North Carolina and Georgia. Now, in their defense, and this is legitimate, and I want to be fair, when a VP or president comes to your state during a disaster, it creates a logistical nightmare on the ground because there's still all of this security that has to go around it. And the local officials often are like, no, please stay out. But what you can do in that scenario is do the helicopter tour, kind of fly around, maybe do a touchdown somewhere outside of the disaster area where you can speak to media and maybe do an appearance with some sort of support organization. I know today being Monday, Warnock and Attorney General Chris Carr are both visiting the Golden Harvest Food Bank in Augusta. That kind of stuff is a great visual. And I want to repeat something I said last week. Brian Kemp has made himself the face of the recovery. He was speaking to us before, during, and after the storm. He was in Valdosta over the weekend. I think he's going to Augusta on Monday. So he gets it that right now, showing up, letting the people there know that they're seen and they're heard and there's empathy and there's a plan of action is the key. And Kemp is doing it. And we may begin to see the politics of this for Biden and Harris begin to take effect, particularly with Trump coming to Valdosta.
Yeah, I just heard that Harris is cutting her West Coast trip short to come to our region. So
okay.
There we go.
We'll see if any official plans
and real quick, Lisa, because we
soon.
know, I'm sorry to cut you off. We know we have the presidential staff listen to this podcast, but definitely got to give a shout out to the local folks, starting with our mayor, Andre Dickens, who had his staff and cabinet members, all the different agencies, public works, watershed, public safety. These folks did not sleep the night before and after the damage was there. And also, shout out to the counties working with the cities and the states. And, B-Rob, I saw a lot of this too. I saw Republicans and Democrats, elected officials going to their social media platforms and being over communicative with the public. And then lastly, thank you to the schools, the superintendents, the school board members, the teachers, who all were very proactive in saying, hey, we're going to close down schools out of an abundance of caution. Because I was very worried about Athens, where my mom lives, and it had some damage too. And so I joined Brian in saying that. Real quick, Lily just confirmed it. Trump was throwing out chicken boxes in Alabama. And
that's great politics.
And fries.
Yeah, and fries. I think the fries were cold. But
Wow.
So let's see if he throws out anything in Valdosta, Brian.
Okay, but yeah, I think our officials, county, state, local, all get a gold star for taking care of our own during this crisis. So a special thank you to all of you who are listening. We certainly appreciate it, and we felt the effort. Donald Trump, some people are criticizing him too, saying that, he could have chosen his words a little better and been more sympathetic to the plight here.
And all of the other states who have been really hit hard by that very large hurricane. How was that big one? A very large hurricane this week. We're with you all the way, and if we were there, we'd be helping you, and you'll be okay.
Yeah, one of the things I've been meaning to talk about, and I'll be quick about this election, Lisa, is the decline, the lack of respect for the office of the president. And let me just be more specific. There was a time, honestly, just literally less than 10 years ago, before Donald Trump became the Republican nominee, that there was just a certain amount of respect that you had for certain things in this country, the church. You always respect your elders. And the one thing that was always preeminent at the top of the list when it came to politics is this, how sacred the office of the president is, right? And so that all went out the door in 2016. We've seen a decline in how candidates who run for president are supposed to be presidential. And so the fact that I think that there's been a level of a criticism that Democrats and Republicans want Donald Trump to be more presidential in moments like we just heard. The fact of the matter is that we've been sort of desensitized to his lack of commitment to do just that and to just show the sympathy. Now, I want to be fair to the former president. The fact that he said it, that's the first step. He acknowledged it, right? I mean, he showed concern. But, at that moment, Lisa, we've seen the former president do certain things to appeal to the country, to appeal to voters, and appeal to his base. And I just think that, he also has been very critical in the past about climate change. He's basically said he doesn't think it exists. He said it's just a made up thing that radical, liberal, progressive Democrats and young people care about. Well, let me tell you this. What just happened in Georgia, the Carolinas, and around the South, and even, other parts of the United States, if you don't believe climate change is real now, then you better believe it. I mean, never did I thought that Georgia would be getting hit with 100+ mile wind, category 3 and 4 hurricanes in the South, and these are places that are not necessarily completely surrounded around water. These are places who are just, been devastated. And so, yeah, I mean, look, I can go on and on about how Donald Trump should have done more, but I just think that I really wanted to focus on how we as Americans can't forget that this is a very sacred office that he's pursuing again. And there are just certain things you expect from your leaders.
Yeah. So what is your response to critics saying that Trump is downplaying the devastation of Helene?
He said it was a horrible storm. What they criticized him for was saying, you're going to be okay, you're going to be okay, which is what parent figures tell you when you're in a time of stress and uncertainty. You're going to be okay. And that doesn't mean that there's not going to be a tragedy. It's not that we diminish the deaths or the destruction. It's trying to be positive in a time of turmoil. And it's completely overblown and a diversion from not coming to the state, which, if you're going to attack him for his words, then you need to be out there with your actions on the ground, showing that you're engaged. So I kind of reject that. The thing about the climate change is I don't know that a lot of his voters think that his views on climate change are different than theirs, right? We're hearing that the number and intensity of hurricanes has changed over the last 20 years, but anybody who's our age remembers the hurricanes of the 1980s and the 1990s, and they kind of always been there. And so I think for a lot of folks, it's like, we've always had hurricanes. And now all of a sudden it's Donald Trump's fault. He didn't cause climate change. So, I don't know that criticism, and I get it. It's got to do with showing a difference in worldview on what is a defining issue of our time. I understand that. But on the political level right now, I don't think it matters.
Yeah, real quick, I would tell you this, B-Rob. I know just from looking at my landscaping bill, I know from talking to my engineer and the builder of my home, the massive amount of rain and high winds and the unpredictability of when these weather changes occur is sort of a defining sort of, if you look up climate change, it's changing. The climate is changing, right? And I think that's fair when you say that, look, he did acknowledge that it was terrible, but he just could have showed a little bit more empathy. And it's not the first time, B-Rob, that we know that if the former president had just shown a little bit of empathy, right? COVID-19, and said, hey, I feel you, people are dying, rather than saying, don't worry about it, you're fine, just go inject yourself with Clorox and all that stuff. He probably would have had a different outcome. And then the second thing I would quickly say is that, Brian is right. It is not something that his base cares about, but we're trying to win an election. And we know, and you've seen the polling, B-Rob, climate change is something that's very important to young voters, and it's very important to people in my family. And it's something that is that the Republicans have, when they've had a chance to vote on it, when it comes to acknowledging and funding it in the Congress, they've turned their backs on it. And so, this is just the era that we live in right now. But yeah, I do believe that you ask most Georgians, and the unpredictability of the weather, the massive amount of rains and winds and heat that we've had, Brian, you and I both talked about how hot these summers have been. It's
awful.
That's what it is.
Fall is warm too.
I know. Yeah, we have a hot fall now. Although this weekend actually was
ready for it to cool down.
I went to the Braves game Sunday. It was a very, very nice temperature out there. I didn't even break a sweat so it's fantastic.
Okay. Maybe things are changing.
But I'll say this on the climate change is the politics of it are really, really interesting, because this is something that, there's no ribbon cutting if you if you slow the rate of climate change. And Republicans, by kind of standing in the way of some policy changes to address the issue, have done Democrats a short-term political favor. Hear me out on this. What I mean by that is, if Democrats were to really do something that might be meaningful, it would be very costly to the cost of living for all Americans. It's going to make energy prices go up. It's going to make home building prices go up. And for your lower income families in America, it would be very, very difficult. Think about if we had added those costs onto the cost of living increases we've seen over the last 2 years, and you might have a revolt in this country. I'm not saying that climate change isn't real. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have policies that take it take it seriously. What I'm saying is anything that makes a difference is going to be really, really hard to swallow. And some of the pushback from Americans is going to be, why are we doing this when China is still building coal plants? We're just hurting ourselves, and we're not really changing the global situation, because China is going to continue doing this, and they're so much bigger than we are. And Lisa, let me say, in with this, we know that there are many homes that have been damaged, some destroyed. But what we don't fully know just yet is just how bad the damage was to all the crops that were on the verge of harvest.
Farmers.
We just don't know. And so, one thing that we are seeing in a note from the agriculture committee chairs in the House and the Senate on the state level and the General Assembly is if there's not immediate help for some of these farm operations, they're going to close. Some of them are not going to survive the damage here. So it is an existential crisis for some members of that agricultural community, and something that we may, you're talking about politics, we may soon see Kemp call the General Assembly back into special session to deal with this. We did it at a previous hurricane, kind of came in and did some special funding. We'll see if that's necessary here.
All right. Well, with that said, what a way to end September. Tomorrow marks October 1st and a very special birthday for a former president. Jimmy Carter turns 100 years old, born in 1924. So despite the storm, there were some nice tributes, for him over the weekend, and so many people, saying well-deserved.
My mom just celebrated her 80th birthday, and she's going to kill me for saying it on a podcast. But and I didn't say it.
80 years young.
I didn't say it. 80 years young. And so I asked her a question, and I'm sure Jason and all the Carter family has asked former President Jimmy Carter, what how do you feel? Just think about all that he's been able to see and hear and witness throughout a century. Not only becoming elected official, governor, a president, former president, and then, living in a place where you were raised and to now see what's going on in this country. So, happy birthday to the former president, Carter. Thank you for all your service. Thank you for a legacy that is, I think I wrote about this in Georgia Trend. Brian writes a lot about different people. And when I wrote about Jimmy Carter, I talked about him being, the top Georgian, the statesman that we all have to love and respect. So definitely happy birthday. And then, the Carter family, thank you for sharing him with us, because I know it's been hard to deal with sort of this transition that he's been enduring. But I'm definitely glad that he's been able to last a century. And I hope he's here next year this time, Lisa. We'll be talking about him on next October 1st.
Yeah, he's determined to cast that ballot, too, in the presidential election.
Yeah. Well, when he went into hospice in March of 2023, the three of us were together that week doing a live event for the Georgia Bar Association. And I said then, I was like, don't count this guy out. This guy's a survivor. He's a fighter. So, but even then, I didn't think that meant a year and a half later he would still be ticking. And here he is. Happy birthday, Mr. President. We're proud of you as Georgians. What an incredible legacy you have wrought. And, I'm seeing
what an incredible family he has standing behind him.
We're seeing a whole lot from
sure.
Mr. Jason Carter in the last year. Certainly has raised his profile. Speaking at the DNC, we're seeing him be sort of the torch carrier for the Carter legacy here in the state. Does he have some ambitions about running again? He ran against us in 2014 in the Deal administration, and which I hope he's kind of gotten over his bitter edges about that. For years and years, he'd see me and he'd be like, this guy used to get paid to wake up every day and say mean things about me.
Oh.
Okay, Jason, let's move on.
Still pretty non-committal when you ask him that. About running.
But I think he's a better candidate today than he was 10 years ago. I think he's got some wisdom that's come with the years. But here's my thing. I say this all the time. If Kamala Harris is president in 2026, I think that's an advantage to the Republicans. And if Donald Trump is president, I think it's an advantage to the Democrats in 2026 in Georgia.
All right. So happy birthday. Happy birthday. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
All right. Thank you so much for your perspective. As always, we have a VP debate this week. So we're going to come back on Thursday. We'll be live on Morning Edition. We'll have a live edition of Political Breakfast to assess the vice presidential debate.
Man, I need Walls to come with it, Lisa. This is just usually vice presidential debates don't really matter as much, but Vance has been taking some hits lately. So B-Rob, I don't know if you got any sort of intel, but I think Walls needs to be nice and specific and concise and defend his record.
I think that we need to see the Yale-trained lawyer show how this guy went from the poverty-stricken Appalachian region to Yale Law School. You've got to be special to do that. You've got to be bright. You've got to be good on your feet. We have to see that. I think this narrative that he's kind of a dumbass and a liability for the Trump ticket is wildly overblown. And no interview has allowed him the platform to push back on that narrative. This is his moment. There's no filter. People aren't listening to what the media has to say about it. They're going to judge from themselves what they see from J.D. Vance on Tuesday night. And this is a make or break moment, not just for this election for J.D. Vance, but for his reputation moving forward. Think about what it did to Dan Quayle in 1988 when Lloyd Bentsen, Dan Quayle never really recovered his reputation.
Where is he today? Where is he?
I think
Where's
he's just
Dan
rich
Quayle?
somewhere, just being rich.
I can't wait to hear your perspectives after this debate this week, and we'll check in then. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Lisa.
Bye, guys.